What is the future of libertarianism? Which political party does it go through, or which should it go through? Which can it go through? What is the best tactical and strategic direction forward? We want liberty to advance, we want it to succeed, but which political party should it go, or does it transcend political parties? Can it go into both parties at once? These are questions that need to be answered. I can't answer them completely, but I will look at a couple of different scenarios in this episode and then the next episode.
No. No.
I've heard it before, and I'll repeat what I've heard. There's a certain group of conservatives that talk about, and mainly from people like Dennis Prager, but also even people like Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin in Britain, who think that in order for things to continue, that there needs to be two big moments. In other words, there's a two-party system in America. There needs to be bigger movements, as in not only a conservative or a liberal Hollywood, but a conservative Hollywood is also necessary. Not just things like PayPal, because PayPals eventually are going to get shut down, and Patreons. There needs to also be a conservative Patreon. So there's a Hollywood right now. The Daily Wire is going to get into the movie business. This is necessary. This is good. There needs to be two different kinds of things in America. This is not something that I want. I want a marketplace of ideas. I want a Hollywood where you can support the sitting president without being criticized and harangued and harassed.
If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
So loving and tolerant, right? I don't want that. I don't want to live in a country where there's that kind of intolerance, true intolerance. I am for what Jason Brennan calls in his book Libertarianism, What Everyone Needs to Know. I want radical tolerance. That's what I'm for. He lists a few so-called radical positions that really most people are for, but a big one of them is radical tolerance. What is radical tolerance? It means that when we differ from each other, we have to tolerate each other. So, you don't just tolerate those that are different from you and are intolerant towards Christians or white people or straight people. You tolerate everybody. You have to. To put it in Matt Kibbe's words, don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. Read that book, by the way. It's phenomenal. That is the Libertarian Manifesto. That is the Libertarian set of ideals. To go back to John Locke, life, liberty, and property. This is what government exists for. And I don't want something this polarized. Michael Knowles has a great line about this whenever he went on this big debate stage, along with Charlie Kirk, Bakari, right? Yeah, Bakari Sellers, and the roaming millennial, Kyle Kulinski. I don't know, that was on the liberal side, the conservative side, as mentioned, Charlie Kirk and Michael Knowles. And Michael Knowles' big point was, the only way this works is if we win and you lose. I want an argument, not an echo when I go vote. And that is true to an extent. However, if I do follow that, I don't think things are polarized enough. For instance, I want things to be pretty much communism versus libertarianism. I think that is a good choice, and people will have pretty clear-cut decisions. The Communist Party would fall apart pretty quickly if that were the case. Right now, we've got two parties that are not that great. Now, I will say, I see certain merits in Trump's running when it came to border security and things like that, but I had problems with him. There are reasons why I did not vote for him in 2020. I did in 2016 when I considered myself a conservative, but as a libertarian, I voted for Joe Jorgensen instead. But in the future, what does that look like? As a libertarian, what should I do? I'm going to look at my next video about the Libertarian Party, the problems that it has. But what problems do the conservatives face in the Republican Party? The conservatives and the libertarians trying to ally with each other. Libertarians looking at the Republican Party should try to pull a libertarian direction, but is that possible? The neocon wing has really taken over that party. The side that is for intervention. And Barry Goldwater, by the way, who is great in many, many ways, was not when it came to foreign policy. He was very much about spreading freedom, so to speak, by an aggressive foreign policy. And I don't want that. I'm much more of a Ron Paul. Really, I'm very much a Ron Paul libertarian. If I was ever to refer to myself as a conservative, it would be a Ron Paul conservative, but even then I would say a Ron Paul libertarian. That is what I am. Because conservative is a bit of a term that does not describe me, and I can go into that some other time. But can libertarians join the Republican Party in hopes of pulling it in a libertarian direction? They can. Is that the best path forward? I'm not sure. I'm going to look at some of the pros and cons of that, and then the next video, pros and cons of joining the Libertarian Party, along with some satire about the Libertarians movement, which will be really nice. But I have different satire for this episode, but please continue to watch on. The Republican Party used to look pretty libertarian. Look at William Howard Taft. Look at Robert A. Taft, his grandson, I believe. I have a friend that talked to Robert Taft III. They were old right libertarians, and I've mentioned them on my old channel, Renowned Reviewer 1923, which is a bit of a dumpster fire. But you can watch it if you want, called Studying the Old Right. They were more libertarian than they are conservative. They were very constitutionalist. They wanted actual freedom. They wanted real limited government. They were not neocons. That came later. They were very much in step with Ron Paul. That's what the whole Republican Party looked like at a time. The parties got closer in the New Deal only because a lot of the conservatives didn't go with the old right. But we need a party that looks like the old right. So I've kind of said things that are contradictory. There was part of the Republican Party that went along with the FDR liberals. That's one of the reasons why FDR got elected. But there was also Republicans in that opposed the New Deal. We need an old right Republican Party right now, or a new right. It's like we have new right now. A new right, one that opposes the Green New Deal, one that opposes the $15 minimum wage and can accurately and intelligently articulate why. And we're going to have our opposition. We're going to have the Lindsey Grahams, the Jeff Sessions of the world oppose us and talk about how great the war on drugs is and how they don't want libertarians in the party, which Lindsey Graham has said. My own senator of South Carolina, my own U.S. senator, he's not state senator, has talked negatively against libertarians. There's going to be Laura Ingrams that also talk about how libertarianism is not respectable, who I strongly disagree with in that sense. Protectionism and tariffs are a big point of differentiation between conservatives, but as a libertarian, I'm not of the variant of open borders. Would I be? There are certain cases where I'd be okay with open borders, but we don't live in that world right now. I can go into that in another video, but I would first need to read the book Open Borders by Brian Kaplan and want to hear his arguments, because I think he's probably one of the most intelligent libertarians of our time, and I want to hear his case for them and see if that's achievable in our lifetime and whether to support it or not. But I'd have to read that first as far as it goes, because he talks about how, according to what he's studied, the immigration restrictions have basically split in two, so we're only making about half the GDP that we would make if we loosened up on regulation, and that includes border control. I'm not going to speak definitively about whether libertarians should join the Republican Party. I think that we should help libertarians no matter the party. I will say that. But I'll look at the Libertarian Party next video, and we can decide. I want you to decide whether to support the Republican or Libertarian Party. There's baggage in both movements. You decide which is more acceptable to you, or you decide you don't want to deal with either party, or both. You could have a foot in both camps. There's people like that too. These libertarians are important to the movement, and I would not get rid of them. I would work with them instead. It's been a while, I have to say, since I've gone over some headlines, and today is a satirical Saturday, so allow me to catch us up on some headlines. So let me open up with, first of all, Democrats are surprised and indeed shocked that conservatives refuse to unify behind their reconciliatory and very reasonable goal to impeach former President Donald Trump. The country needs to unify behind impeaching and prosecuting former political opponents. President Joe Biden, seeing that his first speech calling for unity in America wasn't working, made another speech yesterday. "Look, here's the deal," he said as cameras clicked and liberals smiled. "We've all got to come together, number one. Number two, the former Vice President Joe Biden, the former President Donald Bush." Here, Biden paused. "Well, you know what I mean. Look, the fact of the matter is, my dad used to tell me, champ, when you're whistling while walking, you don't forget to look both ways before you throw your lucky horseshoe. And that's what our country needs right now. Look, folks, look. We need to unite. Democrat and leftist, black and African American, gays and homosexuals. And we can do it. There's nothing we can do when we do it together. We can do this. We can impeach Trump and fight his fascist voters. Now support us. The Biden administration is perplexed that since yesterday's rousing speech, Republicans are still opposing the process. Vice President Harris has put out a statement saying that if you don't know whether to support or oppose impeachment, then you ain't American, a slogan a lot of conservatives wholeheartedly agree with. Another story I saw involved businesses preparing for a $15 minimum wage per hour. The bill has not yet passed, but Walmart is not taking any chances. An article was written on TotallyNotNonsense.com that one general manager, Rob in Eastern Arkansas, who works for Walmart, was heartbroken to have to let half of his staff go yesterday. I hated having to fire those 2 employees, he said, shaking his head sadly. They were good. Michael, a high school student of 22, had been here for only 6 weeks, but he had to go. And so did Marty, a 76-year-old just trying to make some extra cash. He couldn't quite hear you, and even when he did, I was told multiple times that he wasn't much help, but at least he tried. Michael, on the other hand, Rob shuddered a little. But I don't want to speak bad of them, the GM went on. I had no choice. Corporate is automating everything. The entire front end will be self-checkouts. Machines are stocking the place at night. It's going to be a huge change. I mean, think about it. Machines don't pick up the phone and answer it. They ignore customers. They don't respond to intercom calls. They won't look you in the eye, can't take verbal commands, and are impossible to make conversation with. At this, Rob paused. A smile crept onto his mouth. Actually, it may not be much of a change at all. And like all of you, I was truly devastated to hear the awful shipwreck news. For those of you who aren't sure what I'm talking about, a group of congressmen went on a cruise and had a horrible shipwreck. Fortunately, they made it to the lifeboats and were picked up one by one. But Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez were in a boat that crashed on a small island nearby, crippling the lifeboat. A few hours later, the 3 of them looked out and saw a small fishing boat a little less than 2 miles out. Shouting proved ineffective, but each one of them decided to swim out to the boat. Speaker Pelosi made it 60 feet before collapsing into the water and drowning. Senator McConnell swam half a mile before he too drowned, vanishing below the water's surface. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez swam 1 mile, got tired, and swam back. I'm the renowned reviewer, the comedic curator of libertarian laughter. Peace and victory.